Standards of beauty have varied enormously according to time and place. Yet as long as people have ordered their social relations, hairdressing has had a role in the struggle for status and reproduction. Humans, writes Robin Bryer, are unique in two aspects of their behavior: wearing clothes and having their hair cut voluntarily. p. 9. Hairdressing is part of the human condition, a culture of hairdressing in fashions in hair. The first 5,000 years, the author Richard Corson quotes a 17th-century source describing a teenage noblewoman attempting to turn her hair blonde. After exposing it to the hot sun for hours and anointing it with a coloring substance that seemed to produce the effect, she was afflicted with a near-daily nosebleed and, being desirous to stop the blood by the pressing of her nostrils, not far from her right eye toward her temple, through a pore, as it were by a hole made with a needle's point, the blood burst out abundantly, and she was diseased by the obstruction of her courses. p. 173. Quote, early civilizations' archaeological evidence suggests that the early Egyptians wore their natural hair in tight braids. That changed with the discovery of the art of wig making. Hair was then cut short or shaved. Young boys retained their cues, but adults who could afford them wore wigs, especially for special occasions. Specialists made up elaborate headdresses filled with jewels and expensive accessories and splashed with oils and perfumes. The Mesopotamian civilizations preferred heavy beards and long hair, often frizzed or waved. At Knossos, Cretan women wore elaborate coiffures, with golden hairpins, and lots of makeup. As always, different codes distinguished elites, kings, nobles, priests from commoners. The ancient Greeks invented the beauty salon, where women had their cheeks blanched with white lead and their naturally blonde hair artistically dressed. Sometimes it was dyed red or blue. Spartan brides cropped their hair. Athenians wore veils over their dressed hair. They cut it as a sign of mourning. Beginning in the 5th century BCE, Greek men began to wear their hair short. It was Alexander the Great who insisted that his soldiers shave their beards in order to deprive their foes of a handle during combat. The Romans at first copied the Greeks and then developed more elaborate hairstyles to match the imperial ethic. Men often wore their hair short, in what came to be called the titus, after the emperor. Attended to by the barbers who worked at the marketplaces and public baths, or by their slaves, who were shaved bald, both men and women curled their hair and dyed it red. They applied costly oils and pomatums or wore expensive wigs. The most extravagant powdered their hair with gold dust. In the East, Byzantine hairstyles blended Greco-Roman culture with Oriental. Men wore moderately short hair, mustaches, and beards. Feminine coiffures incorporated pearls and precious metals, which were also used for ecclesiastical costumes. Sometimes the fashion was for bare heads, sometimes for ribbons or ornamented turbans. Turbans became standard in Moorish culture, although the Islamic injunction against graven images, like that of the Jewish religion, means that documentation of Islamic hairstyles remains sparse before the Christian Middle Ages. Wigs no longer played the dominant role in coiffure, as they had in the past. Still, the century admired long, luxurious hair, and since most women did not possess hair of sufficient quality or quantity, they made generous use of false hair. In fact, the taste for postiches, bits of false hair, drove the international market in hair to new heights. By the turn of the 20th century, the United States was importing more than 500,000 tons of hair per year, a $3 million business. Most of this stuff came from European peasant women in the poorer rural areas, who used their long tresses as a sort of cash crop. Billy Jones Kana describes her disappointing first trip to a beauty shop to have a perm in 1928. As I recall, I couldn't have cared less about curls, but went along and was tortured beyond my wildest imagination. First our hair was washed and cut, then we waited and waited. There were women everywhere in different stages of getting beautified. Everyone was waiting. My hair was wound up on spiral rods so tight that I thought I would never blink again, and after the machine that looked like a milking machine was attached to the rods, I couldn't move. Then, it began to steam and tears rolled down my cheeks. Someone got a blower and cooled my head here and there, but my scalp was scalded. Willett, pp. 92-93. Quote, modern hairdressing. The wheel of hair fashion took its next dramatic turn in the mid-1880s, when Marcel Gratteau, a hitherto unknown hairdresser in Paris, perfected a technique for giving hair soft, beautiful, durable waves and thereby launched the modern era of hairdressing. Replacing the nests of postiches and fancy bijoux, the Marcel wave radically simplified ladies' hairstyles. Many of the most celebrated coiffeurs hated the Marcel for precisely this reason, but women loved it. An insatiable popular demand soon forced its opponents to capitulate, and the Marcel wave became the basis of a fashionable coiffure for the next 25 years. Although, to be sure, enterprising hairdressers found ways to dress Marceled hair with the traditional assortment of feathers, flowers, and pricey doodads. The négligé styles of the Belle Époque, often colored with henna or dusted with white or gray powder, featured ribbons, enameled combs, and big chignons. When the dean of French coiffeurs, Émile Long, complained about the cheap waves he saw on the midinettes working girls on the streets of Paris, he was pointing to the fact that the stunning success of Marcelling depended on a fundamental change in the social contours of fashion. It coincided with the early stages of a big expansion in the market for fashionable things in Western society. Creating the modern beauty salon. In effect, three developments combined to create the modern beauty salon and the culture associated with it. First, rising wages gave women more disposable income, while greater autonomy freed them to spend it as they pleased. Second, a loosening of social constraints made it more acceptable for women to move in public spaces, that is, to take their toilettes out of the boudoir and into the hairdressing salon. Third, a critical series of technological developments expanded the services available in the salon. New sensibilities about hygiene, combined with water heaters and hair dryers, encouraged women to have their hair shampooed. Non-toxic dyes helped dissolve old taboos about hair coloring. Most critically, the invention of the permanent wave machine enabled women to alter their hair dramatically, while it brought hairdressers a huge new source of revenue. For a few hours hooked up to this contraption, a woman would pay anywhere from 10 to 50 times the cost of an ordinary haircut. These new consumer habits were nourished by the growing number of magazines aimed at middle and working class women, and especially by the movie stars who were coming to dominate popular ideas of beauty and fashion. One presumes that the first hairdos were long, scraggly, and filthy. Even given the general squalor atop primitive heads, however, it is likely that some hair was considered more attractive and admirable than others. What is certain is that wherever primitive society congealed into civilization, it produced a culture of hairdressing.